The ballroom shimmered like a dream, golden chandeliers spilling light over marble floors, crystal glasses catching the glow like prisms, gowns swirling in shades of silver and midnight blue. It was the kind of wedding people in the city expected from millionaires. Except for the bride. Every head in the room turned when she appeared, pale silk gown flowing around slim shoulders, her eyes lowered not from shyness but from the weight of 1,000 stares. Servants froze, guests leaned in closer, voices hissed behind manicured hands. Is it true? That's her? The maid? Yes. She worked in one of his estates, sweeping floors, scrubbing rooms. And now she's the bride. Laughter followed, sharp and cruel. How long do you think she'll last? A year? Maybe 2. She doesn't fit. She never will. Elena kept walking, steps steady though her heart thundered. She lifted her eyes briefly, catching glimpses of judgment curling in every smirk. The whispers clawed at her skin with invisible hands. But then her gaze found him. Adrienne Blackwell. Calm, tall, waiting at the altar with quiet composure no wealth could manufacture. His tuxedo was immaculate, of course, but his eyes remained centered only on her, as though no one else in the room mattered. He smiled faintly, and in that smile, Elena found just enough strength to keep moving forward. Her breath caught when she reached him. He extended his hand, steady, as if shielding her not with walls or guards, but with presence. She slid her trembling hand into his. His grip was warm, firm, anchoring her in a storm of doubt. The crowd leaned forward eagerly, feeding on disbelief. The millionaire could have had anyone. Every woman in this city would sell her soul for him. And he chooses her? It's obscene. At the front row, Adrienne's mother sat stiff-backed, her pearl necklace gleaming like armor. Her lips pressed into a sharp line that didn't curve even when Elena approached. Next to her, Adrienne's business partner elbowed another man gruffly, muttering, "Mark my words, she'll embarrass him. She'll drag his name down." But Adrienne didn't look at them. He didn't even notice. His focus never once wavered from Elena. The priest's voice rose above the crowd. "We are gathered today to witness the union of Adrienne Blackwell and Elena Marlo." The murmurs didn't stop. "She was ironing sheets last year. She's nothing but a ladder climber. She'll be gone once he gets bored." Elena's throat tightened. For a flicker she wanted to run, to let them laugh while she disappeared. But then Adrienne's thumb brushed gently against her hand, grounding her. He leaned closer, whispering just for her, "Ignore them. They'll never understand what I do." Her chest trembled with both fear and love. She could barely breathe under the weight of disapproval, but his steadiness pulled her back from collapse. The vows began. Adrienne's voice sounded clear, unflinching, every word striking like stone set in mortar. But when it came time for Elena to speak, silence stretched. Every guest leaned forward, desperate to hear if the maid-turned-bride could manage even the words of a promise. Her lips parted, breath shaking. Whispers sparked behind her like the tick of a timer. "She's weak. She'll fall apart. She doesn't belong here." Elena closed her eyes briefly. In her mind, she saw not chandeliers or marble, not judgment or pearls. She saw where she came from, dark halls lined with mops and buckets. She saw her hands red from scrubbing tile. She saw long nights folding sheets until her back broke. And within those memories she saw Adrienne again, the way he had looked at her, not as a servant, not as background, but as someone. Strength bloomed in her chest. She opened her eyes, staring up at the man who had somehow changed everything simply by seeing her. Her voice, though trembling, rose through the cavern of whispers. "I do." The room gasped. The smallest word in existence, yet it shook the venom from the crowd like a bell silencing snakes. But still their eyes sneered. "She doesn't deserve him. This won't last. It's a fairy tale that will collapse before it even ends." Elena squeezed Adrienne's hand, bracing herself. Because even as she stood at the altar, wearing the gown she never believed she would wear, she couldn't silence the truth circling in her head like a vulture. They might be right. Could a maid truly stand beside a millionaire? And if so, how could she prove it wasn't a trick of fate, but a story no one would ever forget? The answer lay not at the altar, but in how their story had truly begun. Not here, but back in the shadows of a mansion hallway, long before chandeliers lit her shoulders. Because Elena Marlo had once been nothing more than a maid with eyes lowered to the floor. And Adrienne Blackwell had once been the master she wasn't supposed to notice. That was where it all started. And that was why no one believed it could ever end here. Before chandeliers reflected in her eyes and silk brushed her skin, Elena Marlo's life was buckets of water and cracked hands. The Blackwell estate was a world of endless hallways, gleaming marble in endless rows, portraits of ancestors with judging stares, staircases wide enough to fit entire families ascending side by side. Elena spent her days moving through them, largely unseen, carrying rags, soaps, and laundry folded into stacks taller than her chest. She had been there for 3 years. 3 years of polishing silver that never dulled, dusting books whose spines no hand ever touched, and scrubbing floors so spotless she could see herself in them, though the reflection usually showed nothing worth admiring. A pale face, hair tied tightly back, eyes tired from labor. Other servants spoke of her rarely, except in mutters. Some envied her work ethic. Others mocked her silence. Too quiet, a kitchen maid once sneered. Probably thinks she's better than us. But Elena didn't think she was better. She didn't think she was anything at all. The mansion trained invisibility into her bones. Guests walked by her like she was air. Even other workers barely lifted their eyes. She told herself it was fine. Invisibility meant survival. Don't be noticed, don't stumble, don't fall behind. The less she existed, the less she risked losing her meager place in this household. Until the day she was noticed. It was late, far past the time most of the residents had retired. Elena had been tasked with polishing the grand library's floor. She worked quietly, knees pressed against wood, rag moving in circular strokes. Rows of leather-bound tomes stretched on around her, and the air smelled thick with dust and polished cedar. She lost herself in the rhythm, hearing only the quiet scrape and squeak of the rag, until a voice startled her. "Why are you still awake so late?" Her body jolted. She spun around too fast, the rag dropping from her hand. Standing in the doorway was Adrienne Blackwell himself. She had seen him before, of course, fleeting glimpses in the halls, surrounded by advisors or leaving in sleek cars. But never this close. Never like this. Dressed more simply now, no entourage, sleeves rolled to his elbows, his dark hair slightly tousled as though he'd been wrestling with hours of work. Elena stammered, heart pounding as she scrambled upright. "I apologize, sir. I was told to finish the floor before morning." Adrienne raised a brow, stepping further inside. "And what time is it now?" She swallowed. "Nearly midnight." His gaze flicked to the rag, then back to her weary face. "They keep you working until this hour?" Her fingers clenched against her apron. "Only sometimes." "It's fine, sir. That's my job." Something in his expression shifted. Not pity, not disdain, but a spark of thought. "What's your name?" Her chest tightened. Maids weren't often asked for their names by the master of the house. They were bodies with roles, not people with names. She hesitated before whispering, "Elena? Elena Marlo." Adrienne nodded slowly as if tucking it away deliberately. "Well, Elena Marlo, floors can shine at noon the same as midnight. Don't work yourself threadbare to prove otherwise." Her cheeks warmed despite her attempt to appear neutral. "Yes, sir." He lingered another second, studying her with a gaze not heavy but curious. Then he turned to leave, footsteps soft across the polished wood. She released her breath only once the door closed. Her heart still pounded, her hands trembling where they gripped her apron. It was nothing, she told herself firmly. Masters and millionaires rarely truly saw the maids. He had only spoken out of passing decency. And yet, when she returned to her tiny servant quarters that night, his words echoed stubbornly. "Don't work yourself threadbare to prove otherwise." In the days that followed, she convinced herself it was nothing. But then, little moments began to add up. He passed her once in the hall. Most men of his stature would glance past her, eyes blind to uniforms and aprons. But Adrienne paused. "Elena. Long day." He said her name like it was the rarest coin. She managed only a startled nod, cheeks burning. Another time, as she balanced a tray of glasses during a gathering, a guest bumped her shoulder sharply. The tray wobbled, glasses almost fell, but her grip steadied. Still, she braced herself for scolding. Then Adrienne's voice cut through, "That was my misstep. Careful." Surprised eyes turned to see him owning an accident he hadn't even caused. Elena blinked at him, stunned by the shield his words gave her. Soon it became impossible to pretend these moments didn't matter. Every night when she folded her last sheet, she found herself recalling the way his gaze held her. Not like a servant, not like a prop, but like a person. It unsettled her deeply, like discovering color after a lifetime of gray. But it also terrified her. Because love stories between maids and millionaires didn't exist. They were whispered scandals, the stuff of gossip and ruin. Every hint of kindness could unravel into catastrophe if misunderstood. And yet her heart refused to ignore it. Late one evening she lingered outside on the back porch, the cool air a balm against her tired skin. A distant thunder rolled across the sky. She leaned against a railing, staring out at storm clouds brewing. "You'll catch a chill," a voice murmured. She spun around. Adrienne was there again, quiet but commanding presence filling the night. For a moment they simply stared. His gaze softened. "Do you always work as if the world will collapse if you stop for a minute?" Her lips parted, but no words came. She shook her head faintly. "It's not my choice, sir. I just do what's asked of me." "And what if no one asked?" The question cut into her, sharp, strange. "Then I'd still have to. People like me don't get choices." He studied her then, eyes dark with thought. Not pity, not sympathy, something deeper. A silent vow she didn't understand yet. Then the thunder cracked louder and rain began to fall in cold sheets. Adrienne stepped closer, offering his jacket. "Stay inside," he said gently before slipping back into the mansion. Elena stood frozen in the rain, clutching the warmth left behind. Her heart hammered. For the first time in her life, she wondered if perhaps she wasn't as invisible as she believed. The days grew into weeks, and somehow, Adrienne's presence began weaving itself into the fabric of Elena's life more and more. He never imposed, never commanded her attention outright, but when their paths crossed he gave moments weight. To a woman who had spent years being unseen, these moments sank deep. One morning, as she dusted the columns lining the grand foyer, Adrienne descended the staircase with his usual quiet dignity. His advisors trailed him, muttering about contracts and markets, their suits as sharp as their tones. Elena bent her head automatically, pretending to focus on her cloth. She braced herself for them to pass without notice, but as Adrienne reached the landing, his gaze caught hers. He slowed. "Morning, Elena," he said softly to her, not to anyone else. Her heart jumped. The advisors blinked in faint surprise, exchanging puzzled looks, but he continued without pause, following them out the front door. It was fleeting. But in her world, fleeting was everything. Later that week, as she carried linens through the hall, she heard laughter echoing from behind the kitchen doors. Two other maids were bent together, whispering sharply. "Did you see? He said her name." "He says nothing to anyone, and yet to her? Oh, it's obvious. Obvious she's setting her eyes where they don't belong." Another maid sneered. "She thinks all it takes is a lowered gaze and trembling hands. Pathetic. Men like him don't marry dust sweepers." Heat burned Elena's ears. She hurried past, clutching the linens tighter. When she reached her small quarters, she shut the door and pressed her back against it, chest heaving. She hadn't said anything, hadn't encouraged anything, yet suspicion already spread like wildfire. That evening, Adrienne found her again, this time in the conservatory where she'd been polishing glass until the muscles in her arms ached. The light outside dimmed to golden hues, reflecting against the glass walls where plants curled thick and green. "You look as if you've worked 2 days straight," Adrienne remarked gently. She startled, nearly dropping her cloth. "Sir, I didn't hear you." "You wouldn't," he said. "Most people don't hear me when I choose to move quietly." Her lips tugged into a nervous half-smile. She looked down at the reflection of herself in the glass. "I don't have time to notice things. If I pause, I fall behind." "Then pause anyway," he murmured. The words sank deeper than she wanted them to. She found herself turning to him, venturing with uncharacteristic boldness. "Why do you talk to me at all?" No one." The silence stretched. Adrienne studied her carefully, his expression unreadable at first. Then, softly but firmly, he said, "Because you don't see yourself the way I do." Her breath caught. It was too much. Too vulnerable. She lowered her eyes again, retreating into silence until he quietly took his leave. But the words echoed long after he left. Weeks bled into months, and their connection deepened in moments neither admitted aloud. Passing trays became excuses for brushed fingertips. Glances across crowded rooms lingered too long before breaking. And in the solitude of her thoughts at night, Elena's heart admitted what her lips never dared: she was falling in love with him. But love like that was dangerous. It showed in the staff gossip that sharpened behind her back. She walks softer now, don't you notice? Like she expects him to be listening. He'll toy with her a while, then discard her. That's what men like him do. She's a maid. Always a maid. White gowns aren't sewn for hands that carry mops. The words strangled Elena's breath as she worked, but she refused to respond. She buried herself in chores with almost punishing dedication, certain the gossip would fade. One evening, as she carried trays from the library, she overheard louder voices than servants. Men in crisp voices, seated with Adrienne around the fire. Advisors again, their tones impatient. She's beneath you, Adrienne. You cannot be serious. You're a Blackwell. Your name commands respect. Attach yourself to a maid and you'll anchor yourself in scandal. People already whisper. It demeans you. Elena froze in the hall. Her arms trembled, the tray biting into her palms. And then Adrienne's voice, calm but sharper than she'd ever heard before, cut through. You'll advise me in business, not in who I choose to lift my eyes to. Silence. She fled before anyone could notice her listening, her heart pounding wildly. His defense should have given her hope, and in some place deep inside it did. But over it hovered fear. What if they kept pressing? What if the whispers crushed him, crushed them both before anything had truly begun? That night, as she lay awake on her narrow bed, she stared at the cracked ceiling, tears pooling at the corners of her eyes. She whispered to herself, "Maid to millionaire's wife, such things are only fairy tales." Her own voice mocked her. She pressed her hands tight to her mouth, muffling the sob that rose. And yet, even as doubt strangled her, even knowing the gossip would only worsen, she knew she could not undo what had begun. Because when Adrienne's eyes found hers, she no longer felt invisible. And after years of being unseen, she would rather face every sneer in the world than go back to being nothing again. The invitations came embossed in gold. Adrienne's family was hosting one of their seasonal galas, something Elena had only ever known from the far periphery. Polishing champagne flutes, arranging centerpieces, staying unseen in black and white uniforms as the elite laughed and schemed under chandeliers. This time she wouldn't be behind the tray. She would be on Adrienne's arm. The thought terrified her. Not because she didn't trust Adrienne. His calm presence never failed to steady her, but because she knew the eyes that once looked through her would now look at her. And their gazes were rarely kind. Still, when Adrienne asked softly, "Come with me?" she nodded. Fear didn't erase love, it simply curled around it like a shadow. On the night of the gala, she borrowed a dress not of silk or jewels but of simple dove-gray fabric that complemented her quiet presence. She had resisted Adrienne's offer to buy her something lavish. "If I wear what isn't mine," she'd whispered, "they'll see it as costume. I can't pretend." His eyes softened at her words. "You don't need to pretend." But walking through the glass doors into the golden hall, Elena felt the dagger gazes instantaneously. Whispers sharpened against crystal walls. "Is that her? The maid? Oh, this is absurd. I thought he was joking." Across the room, women in sequin gowns turned sharp eyes toward her. Men smirked behind champagne glasses. Already the air tightened with ridicule. Elena clung to Adrienne's arm as if it were the only steady ground on a shaking floor. He leaned down, murmuring gently, "Breathe." But then across the room, a voice sliced through the laughter. "Adrienne. Cassandra Price. Wealthy heiress, draped in scarlet silk, dripping diamonds with every step. Beautiful as she was ruthless." She leaned in with a smile too sharp to be sweet. "I didn't believe the rumors," her voice carried as she appraised Elena openly. "That you brought her." Gasps and chuckles traced after her words. Adrienne's jaw tightened, but before he could speak, Cassandra tilted her head, addressing Elena directly. "Tell me, dear, what's it like polishing silver one year and sipping from it the next? Does the stem of the glass still feel foreign in your hand?" Laughter swelled again. Elena's throat closed. Blood roared in her ears. She wanted to shrink, to flee back through the doors and let them keep their poisonous world. But she couldn't. Adrienne's hand pressed gently against her back, steadying, anchoring. "Careful, Cassandra," Adrienne said, his voice sharper than usual. Mockery doesn't make you taller. It only makes your reflection smaller. The room quieted abruptly. Cassandra's smile faltered but quickly returned, feigning innocence. I was only curious. Adrienne's gaze cut through her until she shifted, her laugh brittle, retreating to another glittering circle. Elena forced a breath into her lungs. Her grip on Adrienne's arm trembled, but he bent down, voice tender against the storm. You held your ground. Don't let their noise define you. But later, alone in the marble restroom, eyes red as she stared into the mirror, she wondered if she was holding her ground. Or if she was simply breaking unseen, quietly, until nothing of her would be left. The night dragged her deeper into unease. She overheard snippets that burned sharper than any gala lights. She thinks he'll keep her? A headline waiting to collapse. No one believes this can last. That refrain haunted her. No one believed. And what tore her deepest was the sting of her own whispering doubts. What if they're right? When Adrienne found her looking pale in the corner, he slid a glass of water into her hand and asked softly, "Too much?" She shook her head quickly, unwilling to admit she felt an entire room trying to undo her. But her silence gave her away. His hand closed around hers, anchoring. You don't have to prove them wrong tonight, he said quietly. You only have to be yourself. That's more than enough. But was it? The staff who once worked with her weren't kinder. When she passed them in the halls days later, some nods came curt, tinged with envy. Others smirked knowingly, whispering loud enough for her to hear. She'll falter. She'll embarrass him. She doesn't belong upstairs, only down. Even when Adrienne wasn't near, his name and theirs wrapped around her like chains. One afternoon as she arranged flowers in the conservatory, a young butler leaned too close, smirking. Enjoy it while it lasts, Elena. The Blackwell fortune feeds appetites, but they never last long on scraps. Soon he'll tire of the act. Elena dropped the vase, shards scattering across the marble. She fled before the tears welled. By now the refrain wasn't just loud, it was deafening. No one believed. She curled into her cot that night, whispering into the dark, "Why did he choose me?" Her heart broke each time she asked, because she wasn't sure she had an answer that could survive their venom. And yet, every time Adrienne touched her arm, every time he said her name softly, she knew. He had chosen. He continued to choose. Whether or not anyone else believed. Elena tried to gather herself after the gala, but the whispers clung like smoke she couldn't wash out. Every corridor in the estate seemed haunted by laughter, every corner echoed with Cassandra's cruel voice mocking her as a maid parading among queens. Even when Adrienne sought her company, she smiled too tightly, her laugh brittle. Inside she crumbled. She began avoiding the main halls, taking side staircases like a ghost. When Adrienne appeared in the library one evening, she excused herself, murmuring she had chores undone. His eyes followed her retreat, unreadable, but he didn't stop her. The truth burst days later. It was raining hard, thunder slamming above the estate. Elena knelt in the laundry room, automatic in her motions, folding linens with shaking hands. She had no obligation to do it anymore. Adrienne had long since insisted she was not a servant, but a partner. Yet here she was, tears smudging onto cotton because this was all she knew. Scrubbing, folding, invisibility. The door creaked open. Lydia told me you were down here. Adrienne's voice came firm but softened by the storm. He stepped inside, rain still glistening in his hair. Elena froze, refusing to meet his eyes. She folded another linen. And another. Elena, he said quietly. She swallowed hard. Don't? What don't? Don't say my name like it will fix me, she snapped suddenly, dropping the sheet. Her chest heaved. The words rushed out like fire bursting through cracks. Do you have any idea what they say? What everyone says. They laugh. They sneer. No one believes me. No one believes us. Silence thickened, punctuated only by rain battering the windows. Adrienne's expression stayed calm, though his jaw tightened faintly. I don't care what they believe, he said at last. But I do, she spat, tears spilling faster. Because I hear it every time. I hear it when they look at me like I'm some pathetic joke. I was a maid, Adrienne. A maid. And here I stand, trying to belong in this world that doesn't want me. And maybe, her voice cracked. Maybe they're right. Maybe this love is make-believe. Maybe one day you'll wake up and realize I'm not worth the fire you've invited into your life. The words shredded into sobs. She turned, about to flee, but Adrienne caught her wrist, not forceful, just enough to hold her in the storm. Don't you dare. His voice dropped low, sharp with intensity she had rarely heard from him. She froze. He stepped closer until his presence encased her, anchoring her to the floor. Don't you dare believe them more than you believe me, he whispered, eyes fierce. You say no one believes us. But I do. I've believed in you since I first saw you scrubbing floors with the same quiet strength that puts half this city to shame. You want to walk out because they sneer? Then tell me what life you want instead. Back to invisibility? Back to silence? Back to nights where no one saw you, no one knew you, no one said your name aloud. Her tears fell harder, her breath ragged, but she didn't pull away. Adrienne's grip softened, sliding down to lace her trembling fingers in his. His eyes glistened, not with pity but with something sharper, pleading. Yes, Elena, you were a maid, he said softly. And you will never have to be ashamed of that in front of me. But you are also the woman I love. The woman I will fight for until my last breath. The woman I'd burn every sneer and every whisper to ash for. Do you understand? You, not Cassandra, not my mother, not any of them, you are the only truth I need. Her chest broke open. She wanted to argue. She wanted to say she wasn't strong enough. But his words cut through the suffocating smoke of ridicule, flooding her lungs with oxygen she hadn't breathed in months. She collapsed against him instead, fists clutching his shirt as sobs tore from her chest. He wrapped his arms around her, pressing her against his heartbeat like a vow. Above them, thunder split the night. But inside the laundry room, nothing else existed but the truth he poured into her like light. It was a fragile truth, shattered easily by the world outside. But at that moment she clung to it with everything she had, even as fear lingered at the edges of her heart. Because she knew the storm wasn't over. She knew Cassandra wouldn't stop. She knew society's sneers would only sharpen. And yet, as Adrienne whispered against her hair, I believe in us, Elena. That's enough until you can too, she let herself believe, if only for tonight. The storm didn't relent. If anything, it grew sharper the closer the wedding drew. Cassandra's bitterness resurfaced quickly, dressed in satin gloves and polished smiles. She knew how to play society's games, how to turn poison into perfume others willingly inhaled. At luncheons, she angled her barbed questions at Elena with surgical precision. So, Elena, the name always said as if it were fragile glass she'd like to drop. Tell us, have you hired tutors yet to train you in decorum? These circles have expectations. You can't simply sweep your way into them. The table chuckled politely, knives of laughter that nicked at Elena's lungs. Or perhaps Adrienne will keep you hidden away, Cassandra added with a sly smirk, so you don't embarrass him. After all, one doesn't parade the help. Elena clenched her fists beneath the tablecloth, nails digging into her palms until crescents of pain steadied her. She wanted to answer, wanted to show fire, but her throat tied itself into silence. Adrienne, of course, broke it for her. His voice, calm but edged like tempered steel, sliced through the chatter. She doesn't embarrass me. Ever. That's why she's at my table. That's why she'll always be. The laughter died instantly. Cassandra's painted smile cracked ever so slightly before she smoothed it again. Of course, she murmured, retreating to sip her wine. But Elena bristled still, not soothed. Because while Adrienne's defense muted the room, it couldn't erase their eyes. Those endless stares that said, she's not one of us. It escalated even further at a business dinner days later. Adrienne insisted Elena accompany him, despite his advisor's skepticism. The table stretched endlessly, populated by men in pristine suits and women draped in jewelry heavy enough to bend their necks. Elena wore another simple dress, pale lavender, chosen because it didn't pretend, because she had vowed not to mask herself with silks she couldn't claim. But in this room the contrast cut like a blade. Whispers hummed before the meal even started. Pens scribbled discreetly as if reporters were already shaping headlines. Cassandra was there too, of course, perched beside one of the partners, her gaze searing across the table at Elena. When the servers laid out silver trays, she leaned forward with her silken voice. "Adrienne, darling," she drawled, "we are all grateful you brought your guest. Tell me, Elena, what do you think of these gatherings? Surely they must feel quite different from laundry rooms?" A ripple of laughter exploded down the table, cruel and sharp. Elena froze. Her cheeks burned crimson, her heart hammering against her ribs. Her hand shook as she tried to lift her glass, setting it down before the trembling betrayed her further. Before she could even breathe, Adrienne spoke again, voice calm, steady, deliberate enough to silence the entire room. "She is not my guest," he said clearly. Every head turned. "She is my fiancée, my future wife. And she belongs at this table more than half the people seated here, because she understands loyalty, dignity, and humanity better than any of you choking on cynicism tonight." The silence that fell was cavernous. A few gasps slipped. A few reporters' pens scratched faster than fire. Cassandra swallowed tightly, her smile brittle. And Elena wanted to cry. Not from humiliation, but from the force of his conviction. He wasn't just shielding her anymore. He was placing her, unapologetically, into his world. But when the dinner ended and they stepped into the evening air, Elena's composure cracked. "They'll never forgive me for existing," she whispered, pressing her hand to her forehead. "You put me at their table, Adrienne, but I felt like a child reaching for food out of her depth. I can't live at war with every eye on me." Adrienne turned, his gaze darkening under the lamplight. "Then don't live at war with them. Live with me. That's all this has ever been about." She blinked against tears. "And what if I can't carry it? What if I'm too small for a life this heavy?" He leaned close, voice rawer than she had ever heard it. "Then let me carry it for both of us until you see what I already do, that you have never been small. Not once." Her heart cracked at his words. His conviction was unwavering, but her fear was an anchor around her ribs. She wanted to believe him, wanted to step into that belief, but every cruel whisper still echoed. The maid at his table. The maid pretending to belong. Back in her room that night, Elena curled against her linen sheets, staring at the ceiling she had stared at for years. But for the first time, something shifted in her thoughts. No matter how cruel Cassandra became, no matter how scornful the elite whispers grew, Adrienne had not wavered. He had taken her hand in front of them all and dared them to whisper louder. And somewhere deep inside, Elena realized, maybe the love story no one believed wasn't meant to be believed by them. Maybe it was meant to be believed only by her. Still, the hardest battles weren't finished. Cassandra would sharpen her knives again. Adrienne's family would calculate and scheme. And society's venom ran deep. But as Elena closed her eyes, her last thought gave her a flicker of steadiness. If he refuses to step back, then I cannot keep shrinking. I have to try to stand beside him. By now, whispers of the maid-turned-fiancé weren't confined to drawing rooms or society luncheons. They had spilled into headlines, framed not in celebration but in skepticism. From broom to ballroom, Adrienne Blackwell's curious choice. Heiress of dust? The maid who snared a millionaire. The cruelest column dubbed her the pretender bride. Elena never bought the papers, but she couldn't avoid them. Copies slapped open across benches on train platforms, valet boys murmuring too loudly about the maid marrying Blackwell, passers-by craning necks with thin smiles as she hurried with downcast eyes. The worst came one afternoon when she accompanied Adrienne to a gallery opening. She didn't want to attend, her nerves still raw from Cassandra's attacks and the dinner table humiliation, but Adrienne had asked gently, "Please, stand beside me." She wanted to prove she could. But the gallery glittered with judgment sharper than chandeliers. Paintings hung on tall white walls, yet Elena felt as though she were the exhibition, every gaze dissecting her. At first, the murmurs tangled into the usual hum. Until, "Excuse me," a woman's voice rang too loudly, halting the air. She was tall, statuesque, wearing black silk draped like armor. Across her arm hung the unmistakable crook of Cassandra's hand, smiling like a cat with cream. The woman's eyes bored into Elena. "Is it true then?" The crowd hushed instantly. This. Her jeweled hand gestured pointedly at Elena, as though she were some artifact, not a person. "That the rumors are not exaggerations? That you are indeed Miss Marlo? You kept rooms here, didn't you? Polished their tables? And now you stand here pretending at pearls you've never owned." Gasps and chuckles followed. Elena's body froze, her cheeks burning. She wanted to speak, to summon a shred of dignity, but her throat closed. Cassandra leaned in, her voice dripping into the silence. "Tell us, how does it feel to be society's joke?" The room erupted with vicious laughter. Elena's chest caved. She turned, eyes stinging, blinking back tears. She couldn't breathe. She stormed out into the rain, gown dragging through puddles as photographers scrambled like vultures at the door. Flashbulbs flared, cameras catching her flushed face, her tears, her escape. Behind her, Adrienne's voice barked against the laughter, sharp as thunder. But she didn't stay to hear. She locked herself in her small chamber that night, huddled on her cot. Trembling hands clutched her temples as the voices played louder in her head. "Joke. Pretender. She'll embarrass him. This won't last. She's nothing." When Adrienne came to find her, she couldn't face him. "Elena," his voice grew thick behind the door. "Please. Don't hide from me." But she did. She pressed her back against the wood and shook, crying until her voice was a whisper, "You deserve better." He pressed his palm flat against the other side of the door. His voice cracked as he spoke. "What could be better than the only person who's ever loved me without seeing the bank account first? Elena, don't let their cruelty decide who we are." But she shook her head silently, tears soaking her knees. She didn't answer. For days she drifted like a ghost. She avoided the grand halls, avoided Adrienne's gaze. She rehearsed the words in her head hundreds of times. "I can't, Adrienne. I can't survive this world. You'll resent me when it ruins you." Yet each time she almost spoke them, his face, soft, patient, unwavering, silenced her. The breaking point came quietly in the kitchen. She slipped in late one night for water, only to hear two footmen muttering near the back door. Their voices grated louder than knives. She should have stayed in the laundry where she belonged. "Do you think she'll really make it to the altar?" "Not a chance. The whole city's betting on how long before he leaves her." And then the line that cut her flesh bare. "That maid wearing his ring? It's nothing but a fairy tale waiting to burst. Mark me, she'll be gone. No one, and I mean no one, believes she belongs." They laughed. The sound burrowed deep. Elena dropped the glass in her hand. It shattered loudly on stone tile, making the men jump. Her breath rattled. Their eyes widened when they saw her pale face, but she didn't linger. She turned and fled. Later, alone in her chambers again, shaking in the dark, she clutched her hands and whispered fiercely, "They're right. No one believes. No one. Not even me." For the first time, genuinely, she thought of leaving. Not as a threat, not as a dramatic impulse, but as the only way to breathe. She imagined packing up her plain dresses, walking back into obscurity, returning to mop handles and laundry piles, a life that never pretended to be something it wasn't. Better to be nothing, she thought bitterly, than to be a joke the whole world points at. When Adrienne found her again, she was sitting on the edge of her narrow bed, a bag packed at her feet. His breath caught instantly when his eyes fell on it. "Elena?" His voice dropped to gravel. She shook her head, tears streaming silently. "I can't, Adrienne. It's too much. Every whisper cuts. Every glance burns. They're right, no one believes me. And I don't believe me either." For the first time she saw him falter. Pain carved lines into his face, his calm breaking. He stepped closer and knelt, taking her trembling hands. "Then believe me," he whispered fiercely, eyes glistening. "Borrow my strength until you find yours again. Elena, they want to see us fall apart because of doubt. Don't give them the victory. Please." Her sobs shook her body. She pulled her hands free, pressing them against her face as if to block him out. "I don't know if I can," she whispered. The silence between them stretched long and heavy. Finally, Adrienne stood. But his voice was steady once more when he said softly, "Then I'll wait at the altar. If you come, you'll see what I've always seen. If you don't, I'll still never love anyone else." He left her with those words. The door clicked shut, leaving her sobbing, staring at the packed bag. 4 hours she sat frozen, unable to decide whether to carry it out the door or set it down again. By dawn her eyes felt raw, her body carved hollow. She still didn't know. The day of the wedding dawned like a battlefield. The city's elite flocked to the cathedral, dressed in silks and polished shoes, bearing faces sharpened into masks of civility. But beneath their smiles and cordial greetings, their whispers pulsed like venom through the air. "Have you heard? She's still going through with it. A maid in a gown? Absurd. She'll embarrass herself before the vows are even finished." No one believes this will last. Inside her chamber, Elena sat before a mirror, veil spilling over her shoulders. Her hands trembled as attendants fussed with pins in her hair. To them she wasn't the bride, she was gossip with a pulse. She could feel their curiosity biting her skin, their careful calculation of how much sympathy or ridicule they could risk showing. Her bag, the one she had packed in despair, still haunted her thoughts. She stared at her own reflection, pale and fragile, her breath shallow beneath the lace veil. She whispered to herself, "You can't survive this. Why are you even walking out there?" And then, she remembered his words. "Then believe me. Borrow my strength until you find yours again." Tears burned the corners of her eyes. She inhaled deeply, forcing her lungs to expand, forcing her shoulders higher. She might not fully believe herself yet. But she would try to borrow him just for this walk. The great double doors creaked open. The music swelled. She stepped forward. Every head turned. The crowd inhaled collectively like predators scenting vulnerability. And there she was, Elena Marlo, their maid-turned-bride, her gown simple compared to the jeweled splendor seated around her. She walked down the aisle under their dagger stares. "She doesn't fit. She looks terrified. He'll annul within a year." But there, waiting at the altar, stood Adrienne. His eyes didn't waver. His shoulders stood squared, his presence consuming the cavernous space, not through arrogance but through unwavering calm. And when he saw her, a faint, steady smile softened his face. One meant only for her. The whispers didn't quiet. They swelled louder as her heels clicked against the marble floor. Cassandra sat in the third row, scarlet lips curling as she muttered, loud enough for others to hear, "Poor darling." Polishing floors to professing vows, who would have believed this farce? Elena's knees shook beneath the weight of it. But Adrienne's gaze was an anchor. With every step closer to him, the whispers grew dimmer, like walls closing in until only his steady presence remained. By the time her hand slid into his at the altar, she thought she might collapse, not from weakness but from relief. His hand enveloped hers, warm and grounding. The priest began to speak. Even then the crowd wouldn't relent. Murmurs rippled over the sacred words, buzzing like a hive. Elena's chest clenched as she caught more of them. She's a phase. He'll marry higher in the end. Does she even understand the life she's walking into? No one believes this wedding is more than spectacle. Her father, seated stiffly in the pews, refused to meet her eyes. He had not approved, and his silence shouted louder than gossip. Elena's throat tightened as the time for her vows drew closer. Adrienne went first. His voice, as always, was clear, calm, steady. "I vowed once to myself that I wouldn't let this world decide who I was. Today I vow it for her as well. For Elena. He turned slightly, eyes boring into hers. I vow my faith, my strength, and my love to the woman who saw me when I had no need to dress myself in wealth or pretense. And I vow to protect her always, when others try to strip her into nothing. The murmurs quieted just slightly. A few sharp intakes of breath followed. He wasn't just giving her a vow. He was indicting an entire room of condescension. Then it was Elena's turn. Her lips parted. But for a moment no words came. Her chest burned, her eyes blurred. The silence stretched, whispers stirred restlessly. She can't speak. She doesn't have words. Even vows are too much for her. Her heart thundered with panic. And yet, something steadied inside her. She remembered Cassandra's smirk, the footmen's mockery, the headlines screaming, "Pretender Bride." She remembered the cot she almost returned to, the bag she had nearly carried back into obscurity. And then she remembered Adrienne kneeling in the laundry room, his voice raw, begging, "Don't you dare believe them more than you believe me." Her tears blurred into fire. She raised her chin. "I was a maid," she whispered. The words shocked the room, brittle for a moment before silence fell like a heavy curtain. Her voice grew louder. "Yes, I was a maid. I scrubbed floors with these hands. I polished silver none of you would ever lower your eyes to see. I folded sheets until my body ached. That is who I was." A rustle surged through the room. Cassandra's lip curled into a satisfied smirk, certain Elena was crumbling. But then Elena's voice deepened, clear as the ringing of a bell. "And yet, in every hallway of this house, in every corner of this life, only one man ever saw me." She turned directly to Adrienne, eyes shining. "He spoke to me. He said my name. He reminded me that I was not invisible. And that man is the one I marry today." A gasp rippled across the pews. Elena tightened her voice, fiery now. "You may see a maid, but he sees his wife. And I will not bow to a world that mocks love it never understood." The cathedral went utterly still. Even Adrienne's eyes glistened with surprise and pride, his hand tightening around hers. The priest, flustered, resumed quickly, but Elena no longer heard the whispers. For the first time in her life she had carried her voice above them. But she had no idea yet what storm Adrienne himself was about to unleash. The cathedral held its silence after Elena's words, stunned into stillness by a maid daring to declare herself seen. But Adrienne wasn't finished. He turned from the priest, from the crowd, and let his gaze sweep the gilded room. "You've all spoken of her." His tone rang clear even but carrying the weight of iron. Endless whispers. Endless laughter. A maid unworthy, a bride unfit, a story destined to break. He paused, letting the silence stretch taut. "But while you exchanged disdain in dark corners, she carried dignity where none of you bothered to look."